The Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky. Chapter 15. Question. Is it necessary to know an esoteric doctrine to recognize the presence of esoteric ideas? No. Answer. No. You can recognize esoteric ideas by means of the psychological method. Only with the psychological method can you find more in the system which you know. Question. What must one know to use the psychological method? Answer. The psychological method requires no special knowledge. What is necessary is simple thinking, but not the narrow, ordinary thinking. Logical thinking is narrow, but psychological thinking is broader, comparing not two things, but maybe as many as 5. Logical thinking always deals with 2. One must be true, another false. For the psychological method, it's not necessarily so. Both may be wrong, both may be right. I'll give you an example of the psychological method. In 1915, I gave in St. Petersburg a public lecture on life and death. I tried to bring together all the existing ideas about life and death. The positivist, scientific idea of death as disappearance, the religious understanding of death connected with the idea of an immortal soul, heaven as a reward and hell as a punishment, spiritualistic understanding of the idea of survival, the theosophical idea of reincarnation, the Buddhist idea of recurrence, and many others. What is interesting is that they are all right. They only look contradictory. Logically, they contradict one another, but from the point of view of the psychological method, they complement one another. In order to illustrate this, I ask the question, how can all these ideas be right, since they look so different? It is because there is a law we do not understand. The human mind cannot invent anything absolutely wrong. The normal mind, working freely and not tied to some presupposed truth, always arrives at some kind of truth. A complete lie can be invented only by an insane mind or a mind working in chains. Question. Should one know other esoteric teachings and find connections? Answer. Only in a general way to find the place of this system. You do not know enough to compare and find connections. When you think about the system and read something that reminds you of it, take only one or another idea. You do not compare all ideas. Parts can always be analogous, but such comparing can be useful only when you can see the whole behind the parts, and then you may find that the two have nothing in common, because in order to be similar, everything must be similar. Suppose one point in one system is similar to one point in another, but these points are surrounded by 15 other points that have no similarity. This makes them essentially different. We cannot do it yet. We are not accustomed to finding the relation of a part to the whole in ordinary thinking. We think that parts can be compared and that parts can be right or wrong without relation to the whole. Question. But if you find two systems of philosophy that have points or peaks which resemble one another? Answer. How do you know they resemble one another? You only know words. You do not know what is behind these words. Words do not guarantee the meaning. This is why it's recommended for a long time not to try to find parallels and to study the system separately from anything else. Later, when you know more, you may try to find parallels. Question. What guarantee is there that there are no new ideas in this system brought in since its origin? Answer. This is very clear. If the principles are kept, they eliminate wrong ideas. Formatory ideas cannot exist side by side with esoteric ideas. Question. What arrangements can be made to ensure that the ideas can be kept pure? Answer. Ideas become distorted when people begin to invent their own explanations and theorize, but so long as they work sincerely and try to verify everything that comes into their minds and work according to the principles and rules, distortion is not at all necessary. In the organization of schoolwork, every measure is taken against distortion, and if it happens, it's only because people forget these precautionary measures. Distortion is generally the influence of formatory center, for when people begin to work with formatory center and nobody corrects them, there is no idea in the world that cannot be distorted in 24 hours. Question. If that is the scale of distortion you mean, I certainly distort the ideas for myself. Answer. For yourself, it does not matter. You have a chance to correct it. Everybody distorts them in the beginning until they have the whole range of ideas, but understanding one part corrects one's understanding of another. You cannot understand the whole thing and misunderstand the parts. And if you can think rightly of the whole, you will understand every part. Besides, your questions show whether you think rightly, and if you think wrongly, it is corrected. Question. Different people want different things. How should we understand the meaning of schoolwork? Answer. Schoolwork has many different parts, all of them to help you awake. Every individual must have his own aim. If the aim of the individual fits in with the aims of the school, they work in the school. If they do not fit in, they leave. You may start with the idea of acquiring knowledge. If you find new ideas, you will begin to value them. The word work is often used without discrimination. Question. But you use it yourself. Answer. I mean it. I want to show you that the only way for you to understand the psychological method, the idea of esotericism, the proofs of its existence, and to have a certain understanding of the system. After that, you can start to work. The system is a living thing, an organic thing that grows and opens up new horizons. You see, we live in a very peculiar time, and the work is very important in that, apart from other points, it gives the possibility to remain sane or to become sane. The further we go, the more we talk about these ideas, the more we are apt to lose sight of the meaning of the whole thing. We take for granted that we have these ideas. We talk about them. We want to get something from this teaching. But we do not think about why we are able to have these ideas and speak about them. The teaching itself, certain kinds of teaching, certain kinds of ideas, become accessible to people only at certain moments, at very difficult periods. These are not the ordinary kind of ideas that you can get at any time and any moment. Quite the opposite. The very fact that we can have these ideas shows that it is an extremely difficult time. It would have been much easier to work with these ideas, say, 30 or 40 years ago, but in reality, one thing depends upon another. For if times were not so difficult, we would not have had them. So, if we keep this in mind, even this realization alone will by itself bring us to the right attitude. It will always remind us that we have to take these ideas seriously, that nothing in relation to them can be taken from the point of view of ordinary likes and dislikes or ordinary attitudes of right and wrong. In present times, it is possible to foretell what the future may bring. So, we must have a particular appreciation and a particular regard for these ideas and this system, and try to do not only what is right at a given moment personally, individually, but what is right in connection with the whole thing. Not merely think of personal aim, but of the whole tradition connected with this work. And certainly, first of all, unity is necessary, because it's possible to satisfy the needs of the work itself only so long as we are ready to go the same way. If there are different opinions, and one thinks it best to go to the right and another to the left, nobody will do anything right, for there will be no direction. If one person thinks one thing and another thing, both will be wrong. It is not that one will be right and another wrong. Actions must be connected. They must agree with one another. There cannot be a rule that everybody must agree with and understand everything in his own mind, but there can be no difference in actions. Let me read that last sentence again. There cannot be a rule that everyone must agree with and understand everything in his own mind. There cannot be a rule that everyone must agree with and understand everything in his own mind. But there can be no difference in actions. Circumstances are not in our hands. They may change, may take one or another turn. But the whole principle of imitating schoolwork is that there cannot be differences of opinion as regards actions, because otherwise, how can we work? I only wish to show you that in dealing with the principles of the system and organization of the work, we must never forget that we are dealing with a very big thing, and we have against us very big things. If we keep this in mind, we will find the right way. If we forget this, nothing will come of it. Question: what do you mean by imitating schoolwork? Answer: I use this word not in the sense of imitating external methods, but in the sense of inner imitation, which can be done only on the basis of certain organization. People in the work must be united. The more we are united, the more resistance we will show to all kinds of unfavorable influences, and the more we can get out of them, because we will be, as it were, in the middle of a big accumulator full of all kinds of energies. If we are closed, we will be able to get energy out of this big accumulator. If we are full of holes, we will be unable to keep any of it. You see, I must explain to you one idea. Everything in the world is material and limited. Only materiality is different. There is a limited amount of sand in the desert and of water in the sea. Knowledge is also material and therefore limited. It is very useful to remember that the knowledge necessary for change of being exists only in a very limited quantity. Knowledge is substance. For a certain definite period, say 100 years, humanity has a certain amount of knowledge which can be used. If too many people want this knowledge, they will have so little that nothing can be done with it. But since very few want it, those who want it can get it. Question: I do not understand this about knowledge. Is not knowledge consciousness? Answer: no. Consciousness is another thing, although this is true in the sense of a higher degree of consciousness in itself. No. Let me start the sentence over again. Okay. Answer: no. Consciousness is another thing, although this is true in the sense that a higher degree of consciousness in itself includes knowledge. It does not include all knowledge, but the knowledge you already possess. In a state of consciousness, you know at once all that you know. In this sense, you can say that consciousness is knowledge. But by itself, consciousness cannot give more knowledge, although one can look at this question from different sides. As to the idea of great knowledge, higher or esoteric knowledge, we must first of all understand that our ordinary knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is always knowledge acquired with ordinary mind. All methods of scientific investigation are the work of ordinary mind. But there is another knowledge which is acquired by a higher or more developed mind, and this knowledge will diner. This knowledge will diner. That's what it says here. Okay, I would say the word should be differ, but whatever. This knowledge will diner from ordinary knowledge, because knowledge acquired with ordinary mind is always limited by methods of investigation, by eye and ear, for, after all, the most complicated instruments that can be used in scientific research have to be verified by eye or ear. This knowledge is a very narrow knowledge, not based on understanding of the whole, whereas great knowledge is knowledge based on understanding of the whole by a more developed mind. Thus, there are different degrees of knowledge, which are so different that they cannot really be compared. If you learn the multiplication table, this kind of knowledge, not being limited in amount, you do not take it away from anybody, nor in the case of esoteric knowledge, you do in fact take it away from others. But this is because there are very few people who want it. It's difficult at first to accept the idea that knowledge is material, but if you think about it, perhaps you will begin to realize it. Let us take it like this. Knowledge can exist in different solutions, in a very weak solution or a stronger solution. When I speak of knowledge, I speak of a stronger solution, which is very limited. We think that if we do not know something, it is because we do not know where to learn it. We do not realize how many things there are that we cannot know. Because of this, it is difficult for us to understand the materiality of knowledge and what controls its distribution. Just as there are accumulators in the body, so there are accumulators of knowledge in life. At certain periods of history, certain knowledge was collected and kept there. If you find such an accumulator, you will get the knowledge. What are these accumulators? They are schools, even the old schools that no longer exist. Man cannot develop without tapping these accumulators, but if he does, he can get energy from them, real energy, such as centers get. Man number 1, 2, and 3 will only get coarse energy, and the energy that man number 5 can get will be finer. When this is said, when it is said that knowledge is limited, it refers to knowledge in these accumulators. Question: has this knowledge got form and weight? Answer: form, not necessarily, but weight, yes, in the ordinary not in the ordinary sense, but in the sense of density. In ordinary language, too, some words have weight, while others have no weight at all. Question: how can we work to find this accumulator? Does it refer only to schools, or is it something within ourselves? Answer: you can work to come into contact with it just by learning what you can learn. It refers to both, to oneself and to schools. Question: does a man with greater knowledge have a responsibility towards those who have less? I mean, a man who has esoteric knowledge. Answer: esoteric knowledge means school. So, a man who has esoteric knowledge is a man who comes from a school or who is in a school. His responsibility is towards the school. When a man acquires school knowledge, he acquires responsibility. But it is impossible to discuss this question in general, for there are many conditions that we do not know. For instance, certain knowledge may be given only on certain conditions. Question: what a slender thread our connection with esoteric knowledge is, since it depends on you being with us to impart it. Answer: it is necessary to understand that our connection with esoteric knowledge cannot depend on a person. Suppose you know a person who is connected with an esoteric school, but you cannot understand his ideas. Then your connection with esoteric knowledge does not exist. And if the person dies, the connection disappears, absolutely. But suppose during the time he was alive, you understood his ideas. Then you are connected. But if he dies, you remain connected. So you can be connected with esoteric circles only through ideas, not through people. Question: could the people in the system have any effect on events in life? Answer: how do you see it yourself? In what way? Question: I cannot see how they can, except for individuals to become conscious. Answer: for every individual? How can you make them conscious if they do not want to? This is a characteristic example of how we think. We think that we are asking practical questions. If one asks, one must see some point of application. Suppose people could affect events. Suppose there was such big magic. They must spend a certain amount of energy. And you do not know the amount of energy necessary to produce an effect against the current, even the slightest effect. Our time is very bad. Very unpleasant kinds of events happen. In order to stop a typical event on a big scale, the whole energy of the solar system is necessary. Can you command it? The second thing is, do you know what is better? How can you be sure? I do not speak about whether it is possible or not. But even if it were possible, do you have the energy? And do you know what is better? We are people 1, 2, and 3. How can we know what is right? We have only just started to study a system that is supposed to bring man to a higher level. This is a very useful material to think about. Question: I find that I still cannot give up the idea of our being useful to some sort of conscious work, which is going against the general madness. Answer: but this is imagination, because first of all, we must be useful to ourselves. How can we be useful to some bigger kind of work if we cannot be useful to our own work? We must first learn to be useful to our own work, and then, if there is larger work, we may be useful to it. Besides, what does being useful mean? You will remember about being connected with the third line of work. A person cannot do more than he can. There may be different circumstances, capabilities, and conditions, so being useful cannot be taken as an obligation, but one must think about it and use the opportunity when it comes. One thing, however, must be taken as a rule: to do nothing against the interests of the work. It does not mean that everybody can actually help at every given moment, and this is not expected or required, but everybody must be prepared to do what he can and what circumstances allow when the opportunity comes, and certainly do nothing against the line of the work, for one can do many things to harm it. In the beginning, when we spoke of A, B, and C influences, we did not specify what they were. We merely took them as influences. Now we must try to divide these influences into classes, and the practical side of this study will show how to control these influences, how to be receptive to certain influences and not be receptive to influences that we do not want. In other words, we must study life. Our study of ourselves will continue, but it is necessary to begin to study external things as well. Try to understand them and form a right opinion about them. We will not be able to go far if we do not learn to discriminate between external events, even on a big scale, and to find out what is good and what is bad from the point of view of possible evolution. If we find in external events something that helps evolution, that brings us to the question, how can individual evolution, that is, evolution of a small number of people, affect the general state of people? If we look at external life now and we ask ourselves how we can regard it from the point of view of the existence of esoteric circles of humanity, we will see that the state of humanity is far from favorable, because although we know that everybody cannot be in esoteric circles, there can exist in life definite influences coming from these circles, but we can say positively that we cannot see any signs of a control of things by esoteric circle. Life goes on by itself. Roughly speaking, man's situation can be described like this. He is a machine governed by various currents coming from big machines that surround him. What are these big machines? All big events, wars, revolutions, civilizations, religions, science, art, inventions of the last century. All these things produce different influences that act on man. Then, in connection with schools, it was explained that the possibility of escape is only in schools, that is, with the help of C influences. But what is the situation of people who do not know any school? For the possibility of schoolwork is very small and very rare. It does mean that it is absolutely impossible to attain anything without school, or is there such a possibility? Excuse me. You remember I spoke of the 3 traditional ways and the 4th way. These 4 ways are called subjective ways. These ways are supposed to produce certain effects, but some people, maybe very few, may develop to a certain extent even without schoolwork. This is called the objective way, but it is a slow way. Subjective ways are shortcuts. They are for people impatient of ordinary slow work, even if there is certain progress. So theoretically, you can get possibilities of development living quite an ordinary life without C influence, without the material provided by B influences. You remember about B influences: religion, philosophy, art, science. On the whole, if people can absorb enough of this material, it should be sufficient for development. But even at best, it's slow and uncertain development. All schools, all ways, are for impatient people, and that is why they're called subjective ways. So the answer to this question is both yes and no. Some people can develop without schools, and some cannot, because it is a question of different types of people. Besides, the objective way also needs conditions. It does not mean that all people who are not in the work can develop. In a sense, The objective way is even more difficult than schoolwork because one has no possibility of verifying whether what one decides to do or not to do is right or wrong. In school one can verify, but verifying is one thing and doing is another.